Hi folks, and welcome back to Fishing with Den. Well, I've come down the river today because I haven't fished the river for ages. It's been in flood for about 2 months. It looks a bit better now, but it's been chocolate brown for so long that now that it's cleared up, I thought I'd come down and have a bit of a fish. And I'm going to do it with trotting on a float. And that's what the purpose of this video is all about today, to show you the Avon float and how to trot down the river with it, and hopefully catch lots of big fish. This will be a setup video, and I will be doing a second part 2 video to show you how to fish it. But as I say, we're going to go into a little bit of depth on setting up this float. So first of all, the float itself then, as you can see, this one's got quite a reasonably thick tip. This is actually the readout of a fragrance that my wife has. She puts it into the liquid, whatever that is, and it smells nice. But they're quite robust, they're quite light, and it's actually very, very strong. So that's why I'm using this one. Normally I use a slightly thicker tip on here, which is more buoyant, which is actually made out of balsa, but I just wanted to try this one today, see how we go. The body, this has got a shoulder on it. The early Avon floats were actually a bit more sort of just a smooth sort of a shape, and in fact the very earliest Avon floats were made out of a balsa body with a crow quill inside it. Now, crow quill, as the name sounds, it's the feather off a crow, which they've taken all the hackles off, and then they've just put the actual quill down through, and it actually had a bit of a curve on it down there, because crow quills do. But that was made probably back in the 50s or 1960s, something like that, when I was a kid, made by a guy called Topper Haskins, and it was for fishing on the Bristol Avon, and that's why this is called an Avon float. I have actually seen them called toppers as well, because obviously Topper Haskins made it, but mostly these are called an Avon float. Now, this particular one has this shoulder on it because I will be sort of leaning back on the float a little bit today, because this is for boily and pacey water. And look down there, you can see what it's like. It's all rock, and when the tide comes in, we're going to be fishing on that, but that's for part 2. Anyway, back to the float. We've talked about the tip here. This is balsa, and this is actually spring steel, which is piano wire, and this is homemade. Now, Avon floats come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You'd think it was all one sort of body shape and one thickness and all the rest of it, but it's not. There's all kinds and types. Some of them are sort of a more sort of smooth body with a more bulbous and shorter tip. This one, I happen to like the longer tip because I want to be able to read when it hits the bottom and gets dragged under. You hear that kookaburra in the tree. And again, this one is held onto the line with 3 rubbers. Now, just like a pole float, except that this top thing here, this black thing, is actually a piece of silicone rubber. You've also got the normal pieces of silicone down here, one just under the float, just pull that down a fraction, and one at the bottom. And with this one, if you overhang it a little bit, that reduces tangles. I've actually got one number 6 Stotts shot under there. That's really just to keep the thing in position, because it can slide a little bit, and that just stops it from sliding. That's the only reason it's there. Okay, so I could have actually put an eye on here, but the reason that I don't is because sometimes when I'm fishing on rivers, especially tidal rivers, I might need to change the float. So I might need to go lighter, or I might need to go heavier. And with this one, I can just take this rubber off the top, pull these rubbers off to get a new float, push the rubber on, push these on, add a little bit of shot, take a little bit of shot away, and that's it done. This one's 4AAA, 4 AAA shot, also referred to as 4AA, which is about 3.2 grams, something like that. It's not going to be totally accurate because I make these myself, as I say. But then if we come down to the business end here, I'll take this off for a second. Let's see if I can arrange this a bit better for you. Right, coming down about sort of, I don't know, 20 inches or so from the hook, we've got a bulk shot. Now, as I say, the capacity of this float is 4 AA shot, and that equals 8 BBs. Again, I did a video on how split shot works, and I'll put a link down below in the description box so you can have a look at that if you're not sure. But basically, rather than just put 4 big AA shots on there, I've created this bulk on here of 8 BBs. In actual fact, because it has the stock shot under here, and because I've got some shots down, it's actually 7 BBs and 1 number 4. That just gives me the ability to mess around with putting shot up and down the line here as I need to. Now again, we're talking about fairly fast rivers and fairly boily with all sorts of obstructions on the bottom. So you've got to be positive about this. You don't want this to be coming down through slowly. You just want it to be on the bottom, because that's where you're fishing. And it's particularly for things like barbel, or in my case, big carp. Because the carp in here, you know, they can go average 3 to 6, 7 pounds. 10 to 15 pounders aren't uncommon, and I've had 20 pounders out of here before as well. So I'm fishing at the really heavy end. And talking about that, the line is 8 pounds Guru drag line, which is 0.28 millimeters, which is probably more than a lot of people are ever used in their lives. And the hook length is 0.25 millimeter drag line. And the hook, you probably can't see it, but that is a size 10 B911. It's barbless. I still use barbless even on the rivers. If you wanted something a bit stronger, go with something like the Drennan Super Specialist, something like that. Hooks are a very personal thing, and I've had carp to 27 pounds on these, so I'm pretty comfortable with this hook being strong. As I say, size 10, because I'm going to be using reasonably big baits. Rod wise, this is actually a Drennan Series 7 puddle chucker 12-foot carp waggler, which is donkey's years old, but I'm not going to go out and buy a float rod just to do this. I'm sure you could do that, and if you've got the money, feel free to go into the tackle shop and get yourself a specific rod for this. But I'm sure most of us have a rod which will do the job sitting in the garage somewhere. So that's what I'm using. The reel, I'm using a 4000 size reel, which is the Matrix Horizon X. I like it because I can get my finger down onto the spool okay when I'm trotting. But again, it doesn't have to be any real specialist reel. You could, if you wanted to, fork out on a centre pin, or you could go to the Abu closed face reel, but those aren't something we're really going to get into today. We're going to go with the standard sort of fixed spool reel. So, as I say, I'm going to be fishing at the heavy end, as you can tell from this, because I'm going to be fishing for big fish. The setup is exactly the same, regardless of whether you're fishing heavy like I am, or fishing light for little dace and little chub and so on the Warwickshire Avon or something like that. You've still got a float, which could easily be this 4AA1 or a 3AA, maybe more. I'm fishing fairly close in today because you've got that sort of flat bit, and then it does just go straight down to about 18 feet, and I'm not going to be fishing out there with this tackle. But as I say, if you're fishing with lighter tackle for smaller fish, you could well be using a light float rod. You may well have an old match rod lying around from years and years ago, you never know. You could easily use a 3000 size reel or even a 2500 size reel, and you could be using 3 or 4 pound mainline, which would be, I don't know, let's guess at sort of 016, 014, something like that. And your hook length would then be a little bit lighter because you want this to break first, because you are going to get snagged up down there and you don't want to lose the whole thing. You just want to lose this bottom hook length here. And so on that one, you might be down at something like a 012, a 0.12 millimeter hook length. Okay, so that's the basics of it. As I say, I've got this quick change hook link on here, and all that is, it's just a shroud over a hook. Pull it down over it and it holds this hook link on. What it means is I can change to a different hook very easily by just pushing that up and then clipping a new one on. Because it's possible, given what I'm doing, I might end up using a hair rig to get more and more bait on. Sometimes I'll get 4 or 5 pieces of corn on a hair rig. But that's the basis of it. That's what it's all about. As I say, it's exactly the same principle with the bulk and a couple of droppers, whether you're fishing really heavy like I am or whether you're fishing really light. Now, for those of you that have never done this before, by all means, go into the tackle shop, tell them where you want to fish. They'll probably know the venue anyway, but if they don't, just tell them what's in there, let's say it's a roach, dace, chub, that sort of thing, sort of nothing too massive, they'll be able to tell you, first of all, whether the tackle you've got at home will do the job or not, or whether you could probably do with buying a new rod. Now, don't go to an unscrupulous one, because you might say, well, you need all this new tackle. But honestly, most tackle shops are pretty good about this whole thing, and that they'll probably end up maybe telling you that you need some different line, or certainly they'll probably be saying you need to buy some of these Avon floats. Now, as I say, some have a sort of a more curved body, a sort of a smooth shape. Some have these shoulders. Again, they'll probably know the venue you're fishing, so they'll sell you the correct Avon float for the job. And I carry these in sort of 3AA, 4AA, 5AA and 6AA floats, and really that covers most of my fishing, because most of it is going to be relatively close in. One word of warning, if it's deeper and you're fishing further out, use a longer rod. Anything up to 15 feet would be a good option if you've got them. If you haven't, well, you may just have to struggle and see what you can do. But generally I don't fish any more than maybe 9 or 10 feet deep with the Avon float, because that's the venues I've got down here. If I wanted to, you could go and do a thing called a bolognese rig, which is a great big 6 meter long rod or thereabouts. Big float, very similar to these Avon floats, but that's a whole nother subject which we can maybe cover another day. But basically that's it. You want to be fishing under your sort of rod tip or just a little bit further out, and make it nice and easy for when you're trotting down. But I'll be showing you that in the next episode, so stand by. So anyway, that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you did, click the like button. If you want to subscribe, feel free. And until the next time, bye for now.